The sun, a raw, unblinking eye, pressed its weight upon the glass of your solitary dwelling, painting the dust-laden panes with the fierce hues of a desert morning. You move through the spare rooms, a ghost in your own life, the floorboards groaning a familiar tune beneath your worn boots. This was your chosen exile, a corrugated steel box hammered into the raw, unforgiving land, miles from the nearest whisper of civilization. Here, the wind carried no judgment, only the scent of creosote and ancient stone, and the vast, indifferent sky offered a silence deep enough to drown the echoes of a fractured past. Your hands, once deft with the precise measurements of forensic evidence, now found solace in the coarse grain of wood. A half-finished sculpture, a gnarled, abstract representation of what might have been a bird or a broken wing, occupied the makeshift workbench. Each stroke of the chisel was a meditation, a ritual to keep the deeper currents of thought at bay. Yet, even here, the past was a persistent shadow, clinging to the edges of your vision, a whisper in the wind that rustled the dry scrub outside. The public outcry, the media's voracious appetite for your downfall, the quiet, disappointed gazes of those you once called colleagues, all of it had cemented your retreat into this desolate canvas. A glint of chrome fractured the shimmering heat haze on the horizon. An anomaly. You paused, chisel suspended, the rhythm of your breath momentarily disrupted. The vehicle, a black sedan, crawled across the desert floor, raising a plume of ochre dust that billowed against the impossibly blue sky. It was too deliberate, too focused for a lost tourist, too official for a casual visitor. Your muscles tightened, a familiar tension coiling in your gut, a premonition that tasted like metallic dust. The sedan pulled to a halt, engine ticking in the sudden quiet, a stone's throw from your door. The driver's side opened, and a figure emerged, squinting against the glare. He was the former colleague, his face etched with a gravity that spoke of more than just a social call. He approached slowly, hands clasped behind his back, his gaze sweeping over your isolated refuge, a silent acknowledgement of your self-imposed purgatory. "Seth," he began, his voice raspy from the dry air, "it's been a long time." You simply nodded, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, waiting for the inevitable. Small talk felt like a blasphemy in this landscape. "I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important," he continued, his eyes meeting yours, a flicker of something, pity? Desperation, in their depths. They found one. Out near the border patrol station in the desert. The words hung in the air, heavy and inert, like stones dropped into a still well. One. Your mind, despite years of willful suppression, immediately conjured images, patterns. "A body," you asked, your voice surprisingly level. He nodded, adjusting his stance. "A young man. He was found this morning by a patrol unit." The scene. It's grim, Seth. Calculated. You pushed away from the doorframe, stepping out into the brutal heat, eyes narrowed, not at the sun, but at the implications in his tone. Calculated how? No struggle. No obvious entry wound. The victim was positioned. And there was something left behind. The former colleague paused, swallowing hard, his gaze shifting to the horizon as if searching for the right words in the vast emptiness. A single, white feather, tucked into his palm. And the binding. The method of restraint. It's precise, almost artistic. A specific kind of knot, Seth. One we haven't seen in a long time. The blood in your veins felt like ice, despite the searing heat of the desert. A single, white feather. The meticulous binding. The ritualistic display. The details slammed into you, not as mere facts, but as fragments of a nightmare you had fought for years to bury. It was the signature. Unmistakable. The ghost of your past, the phantom killer who had stolen your career and haunted your waking hours, had returned. It was far, isolated. Perfect for a deliberate display. The new detective on the case, she's good, but she's never seen anything like this, the former colleague pressed on, his voice laced with an urgency he hadn't intended to betray. Nobody has, not since. Not since that case, Seth. The weariness that had settled deep in your bones began to recede, replaced by an unsettling, almost electric energy. The quiet life, the slow, deliberate work of forgetting, shattered into 1,000 shards. The killer you had failed to catch, the architect of your downfall, was back. And this time, you knew, you wouldn't be able to turn away. The desert, your sanctuary, had become a crucible. The last vestiges of the quiet life, the slow, deliberate work of forgetting, shattered into 1,000 glittering fragments, each one reflecting the ghost of a past you had painstakingly buried. An unsettling, almost electric energy hummed beneath your skin, a discordant symphony awakening forgotten instruments within your very being. You stood by a reinforced window, the thick pane distorting the relentless sun into a shimmering blur. Beyond the fence, the vast, indifferent landscape stretched, a canvas of ochre and burnt umber under an unforgiving sky. Your hands, calloused now from tasks far removed from the delicate touch of evidence or the weight of a service weapon, clenched involuntarily. The familiar surge of instinct, cold and hard, had not merely crystallized, it had fractured the bedrock of your carefully constructed peace. A shadow fell across the sun-drenched floor. You did not need to turn. The specific cadence of the approaching footsteps, heavy and hesitant, spoke of a man burdened. Seth. The voice was gravelly, tinged with a weariness that matched your own, yet carried an undertone of urgency. You turned slowly. The detective stood there, a man whose face had etched itself deeper with lines of stress since you last saw him. His uniform, usually crisp, seemed to sag, mirroring the slump in his shoulders. His eyes, once sharp and confident, held a desperate plea you recognized all too well. What do you want? Your voice, rough from disuse and anything beyond curt necessity, felt alien in your own throat. He knew you. He knew the futility of preamble. A tremor, subtle as a desert snake's glide, ran through you. Another what? The question was a lie, a defense mechanism. as if the words themselves were too painful to articulate directly. The specific ligature marks. The placement of the body. Everything, Seth. It's him. The air thickened, pressing down on you. Only the detective's words mattered, each one a hammer blow against the wall you had built around yourself. Where, you asked, the word a rasp. An abandoned oil derrick, 40 miles north of here. He was discovered by a prospector this morning. The body. It's been out there for days. Maybe a week. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. A young woman. No ID on her. Just the signature. You closed your eyes for a fraction of a second, picturing it. The meticulous, almost ritualistic nature of the killer. The precise, intricate carvings etched into the victim's skin, symbols that had haunted your nightmares for years. The specific type of knot used to bind the hands, a rare, complex sailor's hitch. It's undeniable, Seth. The patterns are exact. Down to the last detail. The same cryptic symbols carved into the chest. The same precise, almost artistic arrangement of the hair. A wave of nausea washed over you, not from disgust, but from the horrifying realization that the phantom you had failed to capture had returned, or worse, had never truly left. Your mind, despite years of willful suppression, began to spin, drawing connections, recalling fragments of evidence, forgotten theories. The old case, the one that had ripped your life apart, roared back to life with a vengeance. Why me? The question was a reflex, a desperate attempt to push back against the inevitable pull. I'm not a detective anymore. I'm nothing. The detective finally met your gaze, his eyes pleading. Because you were the only one. Whoever truly understood the how. You saw the patterns, Seth, the twisted logic. Everyone else saw a monster, you saw a meticulous artist of death. We're chasing ghosts, and you're the only one who ever got close to touching one. He paused, taking a breath. The chief. He's desperate. This is already a media firestorm brewing. Another unsolved, another young life extinguished in the same brutal, ritualistic fashion. He said if anyone has a chance, it's you. Even if it's just to consult, to point us in the right direction. The words tasted like ash. Consult. The very idea was an insult to the man you once were, a former lion reduced to sniffing out scraps. Yet, the images flashed in your mind, the faces of the victims, the blank, frustrated expressions of your former colleagues, your own gnawing failure. The killer had always been one step ahead, a whisper in the wind, a shadow that melted before it could be grasped. A set of fresh eyes, informed eyes, is all we need. You don't have to be on the payroll. Look at what we have. Tell us what you see. You walked to the window again, staring out at the harsh beauty of the desert. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the distant mountains in hues of fiery orange and deep violet. It was a landscape of stark contrasts, of life and death, of hidden dangers and profound stillness. Just like the killer's work. It meant revisiting the wreckage of your past, facing the ghosts of your own failures. The electric energy beneath your skin intensified, demanding release. The instinct, once dormant, now roared. "Bring me the files," you finally said, your voice low, resonant with a newfound, terrifying resolve. Everything. The old case, the new one. Every scrap of paper, every photograph. And tell your chief I want full, unfettered access to all evidence, current and past. No strings, no oversight. If I do this, I do it my way. The detective's face, a mask of worry moments before, eased slightly, a fragile hope dawning in his eyes. He'll agree. He has to. Good, you replied, turning from the window, the desert sunset now a fiery backdrop to your reawakened purpose. Because this time, the ghost isn't getting away. You felt the familiar weight of the world settle back onto your shoulders, heavier than ever. Now, you were ready to carry it. The hunt had begun anew, and you, Seth Corbin, were once again its reluctant, haunted predator. The desert swallowed the last crimson blush of day, leaving behind a sky of bruised violet and distant, indifferent stars. Dust, fine as flour, coated everything, the corrugated metal walls of the main building, the idle patrol vehicles, even the air itself, tasting of iron and heat. This place, a beacon of order in an endless expanse, now felt like a relic, a tomb for forgotten hopes. The station's interior hummed with the low thrum of outdated electronics and the faint scent of stale coffee and disinfectant. Fluorescent lights, too bright and too yellow, cast a pallor over the faces of the few agents moving with practiced fatigue. You moved through the corridors, a ghost among the living, the weight of your past a tangible cloak. Your destination was a small, cluttered office tucked away near the back, a room rarely visited by anyone with official standing. A man, his face a roadmap of sun-baked wrinkles and years spent scanning horizons, looked up from a stack of forms as you darkened his doorway. A subtle shift in his gaze conveyed a complex mix of pity and grudging respect. "Some things have a way of digging themselves up," you replied, your voice rough, and used to such candor. "I need to see the files. Both of them. The one from '08, and the preliminary reports for the new one." The records keeper leaned back in his creaking chair, his gaze drifting to the grimy window overlooking the vast, featureless desert. "You know I can't do that, Seth. Not officially. The captain's got a federal agent breathing down his neck. Tight lid on everything." "Unofficially, then," you countered, stepping further into the small space, the air. Thick with the smell of old paper and dust. A few hours. No copies. Just eyes. "You owe me one, old friend. From that Gadsden case, remember? Before everything went sideways." A long silence stretched between you, punctuated only by the distant squawk of a radio. The records keeper's gaze returned to you, sharp and assessing. He knew the cost of what you were asking, both for him and for you. He knew the ghost you were chasing, for it had haunted these very halls for over a decade. Fine, he grunted finally, pushing himself up with a groan. He moved to a bank of ancient filing cabinets, their metal skins dented and scarred. From its depths, he extracted a thick, dog-eared folder, its label faded but still legible. He placed it on his desk. Then, from a more recent stack, he pulled a thinner, pristine folder. Preliminary only, Seth. They haven't even finished processing the scene yet. This is hot. You nodded, your fingers already reaching for the older file. The records keeper stepped away, retreating to his own desk, his back to you, a silent sentinel guarding your clandestine act. The unspoken agreement hung heavy in the air, he would pretend not to see, not to know. You opened the older folder first, the paper brittle and yellowed, releasing a faint scent of forgotten tragedy. Photographs, once vibrant, now muted by time, depicted the scene, the barren landscape, the victim, the stark horror of the killer's signature. You traced the lines of the old crime scene report, scanned the initial witness statements, the forensic summaries. Every detail was etched into your memory, a scar on your mind. You remembered the fruitless hours, the dead ends, the gnawing frustration that had ultimately consumed your career. Then, you opened the new file. It was him. Or someone meticulously copying him. You laid the folders side by side, creating a bridge between the past and the present. Your eyes darted between the two sets of documents, searching for the tell, the subtle shift that would differentiate a ghost from a mimic. The modus operandi was identical, the grotesque artistry of the killer's work unmistakable. But then, you saw it. A detail so minute, so seemingly insignificant, it could easily be dismissed as a variation in opportunity or circumstance. In the older photographs, the specific knot used to secure the victim was tied with a section of the victim's own clothing, meticulously unraveled and rebraided. It was a signature of precise, almost ritualistic care. You remembered arguing about it then, a unique skill, a deliberate choice. Now, in the new photographs, the knot was identical in its intricate construction. Every loop, every twist, precisely replicated. But the material was different. Not the victim's clothing, but a section of finely woven rope, a synthetic fiber, almost invisible against the desert floor. It was a minor alteration, a shift in material, not method. You leaned closer, your finger hovering over the image, a tremor running through your hand. It was the same artist, but with a refined palette, an evolved technique. This wasn't a copycat. This was the original, having learned, having adapted. The implications hit you like a physical blow. The phantom had never left. It had merely retreated, refining its methods, honing its deadly art. The subtle discrepancy in the knot, a detail likely overlooked by those who hadn't lived and breathed the old case, screamed of a killer who had grown, not vanished. You closed your eyes for a moment, the hum of the station fading, replaced by the roar of the desert wind in your ears. The weight of the world, which you had braced yourself to carry, now felt impossibly heavier. This time, you knew what you were truly up against. The hunt was on, and you were no longer just a disgraced former detective, you were a man with a singular, terrifying purpose. You opened the older folder, its brittle cover cracking slightly, releasing the scent of dust and forgotten despair. Your fingers, calloused from years of gripping a service weapon, and then, later, nothing but air, traced the faded label, The Sandman Case, 1998. Inside, the pages were a sepia landscape of grim details you knew by heart, yet you sought a new contour, a hidden ridge. The records keeper remained a silent monolith behind you, a ghost of officialdom. You scanned the initial reports, the victim profiles, the autopsy notes that still curdled your stomach with their chilling precision. Your gaze snagged on a witness statement, barely a paragraph, from a truck driver who claimed to have seen a figure, tall and gaunt, moving like a shadow near the old abandoned mining road, far out in the desolate expanse where the first victim had been found. It was dismissed then, attributed to the driver's fatigue and the desert's tricks of light. But now, paired with the recent findings, it pulsed with a fresh, unsettling vitality. The mining road. A place you knew, a place the old investigation had barely skimmed. The light outside the records office window began to wane, painting the institutional gray with bruised purples and oranges. You closed the folder, the weight of it heavy in your hands, heavier still in your mind. You nodded, an acknowledgement of the unspoken pact, and stepped back into the world, the desert night already gathering its shroud. A message, from an unknown number. Curiosity, a dangerous siren, 1. You unlocked the screen. It was an image. Not of a person, not of a crime scene. It was a photograph, stark and devoid of color, of a small, rusted metal bird, intricately carved, perched precariously on a weathered fence post. The background was a blur of sun-scorched scrubland, endless and unforgiving. Your breath hitched. You knew that bird. You had seen it once, years ago, in the hands of the first victim of the Sandman case, a small, whimsical trinket she carried for luck. It was never recovered, never mentioned in any official report, a detail only you had known, a fleeting observation during a personal interview that had never made it to the files. This wasn't just a new case, it was a conversation, a challenge. The killer wasn't just back, they were watching you. They knew your ghosts, your failures, the intimate details buried deep within your fractured memory. This was no longer just about justice for the dead. It was about you. The image of the rusted bird, the desolate landscape behind it, pulled at a specific thread in your mind. That fence post, that particular scrubland. It pointed south. Deep south. To the borderlands. Your hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles white. The desert unfolded around you, a vast, indifferent canvas. You pushed the old sedan, chasing a phantom, drawn by a thread of rust in memory. Dust devils danced in the distance, miniature cyclones against the nascent sun. Inside, the air was cool and stale, smelling of strong coffee and antiseptic. A burly, unsmiling station chief sat behind a counter, his uniform crisp, his gaze sharp and assessing as you approached. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gravelly, betraying no warmth. "You laid out your badge, the old, tarnished one from your previous life, a ghost of authority, and a printed copy of the cryptic image. Seth Corbin. I'm looking into an old case, possibly connected to recent events. I need to know if anything unusual was reported near this sector, say, around 98. Any abandoned vehicles, strange sightings, anything that didn't quite add up." The station chief's eyes narrowed, flicking from your badge to the image of the rusted bird. 98? That's a long time ago. We get a lot of unusual out here, Mr. Corbin. It was never found. He picked up the phone, his thumb rubbing the screen instinctively. His gaze lingered on the word watcher for a beat too long. He cleared his throat, a small, almost imperceptible shift in his demeanor. Watcher. That's an old local term for certain groups that operate out here, off the grid. Not the usual traffic. They watch everything. He put the phone down, then leaned back, his chair creaking. There was something, now that you mention. 98, a report came in about a makeshift camp, deep in the arroyo, not far from where that picture looks like it was taken. He was found by a patrol unit. Completely cleared out, not a single trace left behind, almost sterile. Too clean. On a rock, near the fire pit, someone had etched a symbol. A bird. A specific kind of bird. A watcher. The meticulous killer. This was no coincidence. The killer had been here, perhaps even then, observing, planning, waiting. The desert, vast and indifferent, held more than just sand and secrets, it held an audience. The sun, a relentless forge, hammered the desert floor, turning the air into a shimmering mirage. Inside, a different kind of heat simmers, the frantic energy of an investigation in full, misguided swing. Your gaze sweeps across the scene. The official team, a whirlwind of measured movements and clipped commands, converges on the detainee. He sits slumped in a bare room, his eyes shadowed, his clothes dusty and torn. They call him the Drifter, a transient found near the latest grim discovery, a man with a history of minor infractions, a shadow in the margins of society. The narrative solidifies around him, a plausible, convenient explanation, a desperate act, a quick, brutal end. The precise cuts, the almost ritualistic placement of the victim, the absence of struggle, these are not the hallmarks of a panicked drifter. You feel it in your bones, a discord, a false note in the symphony of evidence they are orchestrating. The killer you've hunted, the phantom that stole your career, moves with the deliberate grace of a predator, not the clumsy desperation of a cornered animal. You move away from the main cluster, drawn by an instinct honed over years of sifting through the detritus of human cruelty. You find yourself in the processing area, where the detainee's sparse belongings are spread across a metal table, a worn backpack, a half-empty water bottle, a tattered map of forgotten roads. The detective, observing your scrutiny, approaches, his voice a low rumble. Anything catch your eye, Seth? Looks like an open and shut to me. He was found him less than a mile from the site, prints match a few old warrants. Seems our desert wanderer snapped. You pick up the map, tracing a finger over a faded route. He's been traveling for weeks, by the looks of it. Why here? Why now? Desperation, the detective replies, shrugging. Heat, hunger, who knows what sets a man off in this kind of desolation? We've got our man. His tone carries a note of finality, a desire to close the book. Perhaps, you concede, though the word tastes like ash. You turn your attention to the shoes, caked with a particular kind of reddish-brown dust. The site was mostly granite and shale. He could have walked through a dozen types before we picked him up. You nod slowly, not arguing, but filing the detail away. Your eyes fall upon a small, almost imperceptible smudge on the underside of the detainee's backpack strap. Not dirt, but a faint, metallic sheen, barely visible. You lean closer, your breath held, and scrape a minuscule flake onto your fingertip. It's too minute to identify definitively, but its presence here, on a drifter's worn pack, feels out of place. This man travels light, without purpose, yet this residue suggests contact with something industrial, manufactured. Later, you request access to the original crime scene photos, poring over them in a quiet corner of the station. The lead detective had focused on the obvious, the victim's position, the absence of a struggle. But your eyes are drawn to the periphery, to the subtle nuances only a truly meticulous killer would leave. You zoom in on the victim's left hand, partially obscured by sand. A faint indentation on the ring finger, a pressure mark, as if something had been tightly bound there, then removed. Not a ring, the skin is not discolored. Something else. The images blur, then sharpen. It's the same reddish-brown hue as the dust on the drifter's shoes, but the shape is wrong, too uniform. The previous victim also had an indentation, a faint mark, on her wrist. And the small, almost insignificant objects left behind, always just out of plain sight. The metallic residue on the drifter's pack, the specific soil on his shoes, the precise mark on the victim's finger, they don't connect to a simple, desperate act. They connect to something far more intricate. You recall a fragment from the old case, a unique, fine-grained sand found on the victim's clothing, later traced to a specific, remote quarry miles from the initial discovery site. Now, you look at the crime scene photos again, focusing on the small speck beneath the rock. It's not just dust, it's a tiny, perfectly formed granule of a specific, reddish-brown mineral, almost like a miniature bead. And it is identical to the unique sand from the quarry, a signature of the killer you know. The detainee, the drifter, is a convenient scapegoat, a perfectly placed red herring. He was meant to be found, a distraction. The metallic smudge on his backpack, the specific dust on his shoes, these were not accidental. They were planted, or he was deliberately led through an area, then positioned, his presence near the victim a calculated move. The game has escalated, Seth. And you, the chosen quarry, are now tasked with unraveling a deception crafted not just to kill, but to mock. The real hunt, you realize, begins now, in the shadow of a false arrest. It's not just any metal, a faint, coppery hue suggests bronze, but aged, almost corroded, as if pulled from earth or water. You bring it closer, your vision narrowing to the pinprick of evidence, your breath shallow. A shadow falls over your hand. Find something interesting, Seth? The voice of the Border Patrol agent is laced with an old weariness, a hint of skepticism. Just a bit of rust, probably. That backpack's seen better days, and worse places. You ignore him, turning your hand slightly, catching the light just so. There, etched into the surface, barely visible even to your strained sight, is a fragment of a line. Not a scratch, but a deliberate curve, part of something larger. It's too small to discern fully, but the workmanship speaks of intent, not accident. This isn't rust. This is a residue of craft. This isn't rust, you murmur, more to yourself than to the agent. It's an alloy. Bronze, but with something else. And there's a pattern here. The agent sighs, shifting his weight. You're seeing things, old friend. The detainee is clean. Just another trying to cross, no record of violence, no connections to your old cases. We've been through his belongings with a fine-tooth comb. Nothing. But your focus is absolute. You remember a similar moment, years ago, in the cavernous warehouse where the first victim of your cold case was found. A tiny, almost insignificant chip of metal, lodged in the splintered wood beneath a forgotten crate. It had been dismissed as industrial debris, slag from some long-dead foundry. Industrial debris. The words echo, a dismissive wave of a hand. You had argued, even then, that it felt wrong, too perfect in its imperfection, too unique. He meets your gaze for a fleeting second, his eyes holding no malice, only a profound weariness. He is a conduit, not the source. Your mind races, pulling at threads. The victims of your past failures, the new discovery, the impossible gap in time. There was always something missing from the scene, yet something subtly added. A paradox that had driven you to the brink. The old case files, you demand, turning to the Border Patrol agent, your voice sharper now. The detailed forensic reports. The ones nobody paid attention to, the anomalies. The agent frowns. Seth, those are archived, locked down. Besides, what could a bit of metal from a backpack have to do with murders decades apart? Everything, you counter, the word a sudden, stark realization. It's a signature. Not a fingerprint, not a bullet casing. Something far more insidious. You close your eyes, the image of the minute flake burned into your retina. The curve. The subtle texture. The bronze. All dismissed, all explained away as environmental detritus, or the accidental byproduct of the crime. But now, seen through this new lens, they coalesce. The curve on the flake. It's too distinctive. It's part of a larger design, a stylized form. A raptor. Not just any bird, but a specific silhouette, a predatory arc of wing and beak, rendered in a rigid, almost ancient style. You remember seeing it, or something like it, in peripheral vision, in old texts, in forgotten corners of museums. It was never the focus, never the weapon, never the obvious clue. It was always a background element, a fleeting glimpse. The agent, seeing the intensity in your eyes, hesitates. What are you talking about, Seth? The anomalies, you repeat, opening your eyes, a fierce light in them now. The things that didn't fit. The small, almost invisible details that were always there, but never recognized as a pattern. You grab a pen from the agent's desk, snatch a piece of scrap paper. With a few swift, confident strokes, you sketch the fragment you saw on the flake, then extend it, completing the form. A sharp, angular bird of prey, wings spread wide, head turned in profile. It's not a naturalistic depiction, it's almost heraldic, a symbol. And the material, a specific bronze alloy, often used in ancient artifacts, known for its resistance to corrosion and its unique, muted patina. This, you declare, holding up the sketch. This is the killer's mark. It was there in the warehouse, a tiny chip from something similar. It was in the desert, a faint impression in the clay. It was even in the last victim's pocket, disguised as a common charm, but the material, the craftsmanship. It was always the same. They're leaving fragments of this symbol, this raptor, at every scene. Not as a calling card for us, but as a ritual, a dedication. The agent stares at the sketch, then at your face, the realization dawning in his own eyes. A raptor. But why? What does it mean? It's a symbol of passage, you explain, the words tumbling out, connecting years of disparate data points. Of vigilance, of the journey across thresholds. In some ancient cultures, it's a psychopomp, guiding souls. In others, a harbinger of change, or a guardian of sacred places. Your gaze shifts back to the detainee, then sweeps across the vast, unforgiving landscape visible through the station's window. The desert, a place of borders, of crossings, of journeys. The flake on your finger, dismissed as nothing, is everything. And with this new understanding, a terrifying clarity settles over you. The killer isn't just returning, they are continuing a journey, and you, Seth Corbin, have just stumbled onto their path. And now, you know what you are looking for. Not a person, not a motive, but a pattern, a symbol, a dark, winged shadow cast across decades of blood. Ted ritual of departure. The connection, once a whisper, now roars in your mind. The killer isn't merely ending lives, they are orchestrating a macabre passage, a final, deliberate crossing. Every victim, a symbolic migrant, ushered into oblivion. The desert, a canvas for their twisted art, a liminal space where lives intersect and vanish. You turn from the window, the image of the detainee's haunted eyes still etched behind yours. His fragmented words, his nervous gestures when you pressed about the abandoned vehicle, the peculiar marks found near the latest victim, they coalesce into a crude map. A name, slurred and barely audible, had escaped his lips, a name he swore was a ghost, a legend whispered among those who navigate the unseen pathways of this arid land. The Keeper. Not a person, he insisted, but a function, a gatekeeper for illicit passages. The supervisor, a woman whose face bore the perpetual fatigue of the desert wind and endless vigilance, watches you. Her gaze is a silent question, a challenge. Anything else, Corbin? She asks, her voice dry as the dust outside. Just tying up loose ends, you respond, your voice deliberately flat. Your badge is gone, your authority a phantom. Lim. You are a trespasser here, operating on borrowed time and desperate instinct. Outside, the sun, a brutal disk, hangs low, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple. The air shimmers with residual heat. You climb into your weathered vehicle, the engine sputtering to life like a tired heart. The name, the Keeper, echoes. A gatekeeper. A facilitator of movement. The victims, all found near historical migration routes. The pattern screams. Your destination crystallizes, an abandoned industrial complex, miles east of the official border, a skeleton of rusted metal and broken glass that once processed minerals from the earth. A place rumored to be a clandestine waypoint for anything or anyone wishing to disappear. It fits the profile of a keeper's lair, a place of transition, hidden in plain sight. The drive is long, a hypnotic blur of scrub brush and rock formations. The road dissolves into a dirt track, each jolt rattling your bones. Dust plumes in your wake, a testament to your solitary pursuit. You navigate by memory and the crude map you sketched in your mind, guided by the detainee's hushed warnings about the old processing plant. As twilight deepens, the skeletal silhouette of the factory rises against the bruised sky. The air grows heavy, not just with dust, but with a palpable sense of decay and secrets. You park a quarter-mile away, tucking your vehicle behind a cluster of scraggly mesquite trees. Your boots crunch softly on the gravel as you approach, each step deliberate, cautious. A chain-link fence, rusted and torn in places, surrounds the perimeter. You find a gap, wide enough to slip through, the sharp edges of the wire snagging at your jacket. Inside, the ground is littered with debris, shattered glass, twisted rebar, desiccated husks of desert flora. You move through the cavernous exterior, your hand instinctively reaching for the worn grip of the weapon tucked beneath your jacket, a relic from your past life, a comfort more than a solution. A faint flicker of light, an orange glow, pulses from a broken window on the second story of the main building. Not moonlight. Not a reflection. Fire. You scale a crumbling concrete staircase, each step sending tremors through the decaying structure. The air thickens, carrying the metallic tang of something hot, something recently worked. You press your ear against a heavy, grimy door. Muted sounds, clanking and a low murmur, reach you. Pushing the door open a sliver, you peer into a vast, high-ceilinged space. Dim light spills from a single bare bulb hanging precariously from a frayed wire, illuminating a makeshift forge. Sparks fly as a figure, their back to you, works with a hammer and anvil. The air shimmers with heat. Your eyes sweep the room, searching for an escape, a weapon, an answer. Then you see it. On a workbench, half hidden beneath a greasy cloth, lies a collection of crude metal objects. They are not tools. They are symbols. Twisted, stylized figures, sharp and angular, each one resembling a distorted compass rose, or perhaps, a star. And beside them, a small, worn leather-bound book, its pages open to a diagram. A map. As you lean in closer, a floorboard groans beneath your foot. The hammering stops. The figure stiffens, then slowly turns. He is not a large man, but his eyes, glinting in the dim light, hold an unnerving intensity. His face is etched with lines, like a map of hard living, and his hands, calloused and strong, still grip the hammer. He sees you. Recognition, sharp and immediate, flickers in his gaze. He wasn't expecting you, but he isn't surprised. You're not supposed to be here, he states, his voice low and gravelly, like stones grinding together. It's not a question. It's a warning. Your fingers tighten around your weapon. The air crackles with an unspoken threat. This isn't just a person of interest, this is a direct conduit to the horror you hunt. The Keeper. And you have just walked into his forge. The symbols on the bench, the map, they are clues, terrifying and clear. He crafts the killers. Calling cards. You are too close. Far too close. The factory's moss swallows you whole. Dust motes dance in the slivers of moonlight piercing the grimy windows, illuminating skeletal machinery. No one is here. Only the ghosts of industry. The air, thick with the scent of decay and forgotten ambition, offers no trace of recent passage, no lingering shadow that could be your phantom. Yet, beneath a rusted conveyor belt, a faded, water-damaged map, crudely drawn, catches your eye. A sudden, chilling clarity descends. The factory was a lure, a false scent, but the map. The map is a breadcrumb left for you. The engine of your aging sedan groans its protest as you push it through the desolate night. The bruised sky gives way to an inky black canvas, punctuated by a million indifferent stars. Hours blur, marked only by the shifting dunes and the insistent hum of the tires. Each mile tightens the knot in your gut, the certainty growing that this isn't just another dead end, but the precipice. It stands like a sentinel, bleached by sun and sand, a squat building of reinforced concrete and rusted metal, its antenna reaching like a skeletal finger towards the indifferent sky. No vehicles are parked outside, no figures move within the perimeter. The sun, a molten disk, begins its ascent, already searing the air. You step out, your boots crunching on the loose gravel.
A metallic tang, faint but unmistakable, drifts from within.
Not rust, but something sharper, something that prickles the back of your throat. Inside, the air is stale, thick with the scent of old paper and dust. Fluorescent lights hum with a tired drone, casting a sickly yellow glow over empty desks and a forgotten coffee maker. This place feels like a tomb for forgotten bureaucracy. Then, you spot it. On a desk in what must have been the supervisor's office, a single, pristine file folder. It's too clean, too prominent amidst the general disarray. Your fingers tremble as you open it. Inside, not a current report, but a collection of old documents, newspaper clippings, and faded photographs. Your breath catches in your throat. The victims, the scenes, even your own discredited reports. And beneath them, a series of meticulous, handwritten annotations, cross-referencing names, dates, and locations. A pattern emerges, clear as glass, connecting the old murders to the new ones, linking them all through a single, obscure supply chain that ran through this very station decades ago. A chain managed by a soft click behind you. The sound of the steel door closing. You spin around. Framed in the doorway, silhouetted by the harsh desert light, stands a figure you know, a face etched into the tapestry of your past. It's the former logistics officer, a man you worked with briefly during the original investigation, a quiet, unassuming presence who always seemed to fade into the background. Always looking for the truth. He steps further into the room, the wrench held loosely at his side. A truth no one wanted to see. You breathe, the name a bitter taste on your tongue. It was you all along. The Phantom. He offers a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Phantom? Merely a ghost in the machine, Seth. A cog in his system that broke far more than it fixed. He gestures vaguely around the room. This station. It was the heart of it. The supply routes, the cargo manifests. They weren't just moving equipment. They were moving people. Disappearing them. And when a few people started asking questions, people like your first victim, the system needed to be quieted. Your mind races, connecting the fragmented pieces. It was never about random acts of violence. The logistics officer, with his access to routes, schedules, and personnel files, had the perfect cover, the perfect means. Too righteous. Your downfall was expedient. It bought me time. Decades of it. Time to ensure no one else would ever uncover what happened here. The system protects its own, you see. Even from itself. He takes another step, the wrench glinting in the pale light. But you, Seth, you never truly left. A persistent ghost yourself. And now, you've finally found the last piece of the puzzle. The truth, finally unveiled, hangs heavy between you, a tangible weight. The desert wind howls outside, a mournful lament for the secrets it has guarded for so long, and for the man standing before you, whose quiet menace has orchestrated a symphony of death across the years. The game, Seth, is no longer about finding the killer. It is about survival. Inside, the sound is muted but ever present, a low moan accompanying the stark reality that has settled between you and the patrol agent. His eyes, once holding a veneer of weary competence, now gleam with a chilling, almost triumphant light. The lives that crossed them. Or didn't. The patrol agent offers a smile, thin and sharp as a razor's edge. Such a poetic observation, Seth. For a man who's always been so literal. He gestures around the dimly lit control room, where screens flicker with thermal images of the vast, unforgiving expanse outside. This place. It holds secrets, doesn't it? The beginning of your end, and the genesis of my purpose. You remember the old case, the one that broke you, the one that started with a body found just miles from this very station, a migrant girl whose identity was lost to the sands. The patrol agent's words, a casual barb, now echo with a sinister resonance. The first victim. She wasn't just a random crossing. He was a message. A test. He claps his hands together, a sudden, jarring sound in the quiet space. And you, Seth, you failed that test. Repeatedly. While I learned. I grew. I perfected. His gaze drifts to a locked door in the corner, heavy and reinforced, a sign above it reading Archive, Authorized Personnel Only. The past, Seth, is a heavy burden. This isn't just a confrontation, it's an unveiling. You take a step forward, your hand instinctively going to the small, familiar weight of the piece tucked into your waistband, a comfort you hadn't realized you still craved. What's in there, you demand, your voice low, a predator sizing up its prey. Another victim? The proof you're trying to erase? The patrol agent's smile widens, revealing a flash of genuine, unhinged glee. A witness, Seth. A stubborn, inconvenient witness. And a lifetime of loose ends, waiting to be tied up with a single, cleansing flame. He pulls a small, silver lighter from his pocket, flicking it open with a practiced snap. The tiny flame dances, a mocking beacon in the sterile room. This station. It was where it all began for me. A young, idealistic agent, watching the world bleed through the cracks. And it's where it ends, with a purification. A rewriting of history. He turns, moving swiftly towards the archive door. You lunge, a desperate surge of adrenaline propelling you forward. Your hand closes around his shoulder, pulling his back with a grunt. He spins, his movements surprisingly fluid, a hardened edge to his eyes that speaks of countless silent struggles. A heavy, metal-plated clipboard, snatched from a nearby desk, swings towards your head. You duck, the air whistling past your ear, and counter with a shove that sends him stumbling against a bank of monitors. Static erupts on the screens, a cacophony of white noise. Always. He lunges again, not with the clipboard, but with a honed, brutal efficiency, aiming for your midsection. You brace, taking the blow, the impact jarring your ribs, but you hold your ground, refusing to yield. You wrap an arm around his waist, grappling for control. The scent of his sweat and a faint, acrid odor was that gasoline filling your nostrils. He twists, elbowing your jaw, sending a shockwave of pain through your skull. Stars explode behind your eyes, but you cling on, your grip tightening. This isn't just about survival, it's about every ghost that has haunted you, every unanswered question. You see the archive door, still closed, and the flicker of the lighter in his hand, still clutched tight the records. He can't reach them. You drive your knee into his thigh, and he hisses, momentarily losing his footing. It's enough. You break free, putting a precious few feet between you. Your hand darts to your waistband, pulling out the familiar weight. The glint of metal catches the low light. The patrol agent stops, his eyes fixed on the weapon. The story is already written, Seth. The final chapter is being enacted. And you, my friend, are merely a footnote. He takes a step back, his eyes darting to a red emergency axe mounted on the wall. A new, terrifying resolve hardens his features. He knows you won't fire unless absolutely necessary, not here, not with the risk of collateral damage or attracting unwanted attention too soon. He has a plan, and you can see it unfolding in his gaze. He is not just fighting, he is preparing. Suddenly, a muffled cry echoes from behind the archive door, faint but distinct, cutting through the static of the monitors and the howl of the wind. A shiver runs down your spine. He wasn't lying. Someone is in there. Someone is waiting for him to finish his macabre masterpiece. The patrol agent's eyes gleam with triumph. Hear that, Seth? The final crescendo. She's waiting. You raise your weapon, but he's already moving, a blur of motion, a man driven by decades of twisted purpose, ready to bring down the final curtain. Your eyes lock onto it, then to the figure before you. He takes another step back, a predator assessing its prey, his gaze unwavering, a strange calm settling over his features. The air, already thick with the dust of the desert that permeates even this enclosed space, grows heavy with an unspoken threat. You grip your sidearm, its cold weight a familiar reassurance against your palm, but the thought of the ricocheting bullet, the chaos it would unleash in this public, if sparsely populated, space, stays your finger on the trigger. He knows this. He always knew your constraints. Then he moves. Not a lunge, but a deliberate, almost graceful pivot towards the wall. His hand closes around the axe handle, the heavy tool coming away with a soft thud that echoes in the sudden silence. The metal gleams, a sharpened edge designed for glass and wood, now aimed at flesh and bone. There's no hesitation in his eyes, only a grim certainty. This is his final act, his last desperate gambit, and he intends to play it out to its bitter end. You don't wait. The axe is a short-range weapon, brutal and immediate. You lunge forward, not to fire, but to close the distance, to nullify its reach. Your training screams at you, disarm, control, subdue. The desert wind outside howls, a mournful chorus to the impending clash. You duck under it, feeling the displaced air, the tremor of its passage. Your shoulder slams into his chest, sending a jolt up your arm, the impact jarring. He stumbles back, but his grip on the axe is iron. A grunt escapes him as he recovers, twisting, bringing the axe around again in a tighter, more vicious chop. The sudden pain sharpens your focus, stripping away any lingering doubt. This isn't just about capture, this is about survival. You grab his wrist, twisting, trying to force the axe from his grasp. He resists with surprising strength, his face contorted now, a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. His other hand comes up, a fist connecting with your jaw, a blinding flash of white light, a metallic taste blooming in your mouth. You reel back, momentarily disoriented, but your grip on his wrist remains. The world spins, then snaps back into focus, the adrenaline of fiery current through your veins. The struggle is a brutal, silent dance. The noise of the fight, the thudding impacts, the desperate gasps, has finally drawn attention. But you can't wait for help. You have to end this. With a surge of strength born from years of buried guilt and burning resolve, you wrench his arm, twisting, pulling, leveraging your weight against him. The axe clatters to the floor with a deafening clang, skittering across the polished concrete. Free of the weapon, he grapples you, his fingers digging into your collar, pushing you against the cold metal of a filing cabinet. You struggle, pushing back, your knees buckling slightly under the strain. Then, a sudden, sharp crack echoes through the station. Not a gunshot, but the sound of a taser. His body stiffens, a guttural cry tearing from his throat, his eyes wide with shock and pain. He collapses, a dead weight, his muscles spasming uncontrollably. You stumble back, breathing heavily, your chest heaving. Several figures, uniforms emblazoned with the agency's insignia, rush into the corridor, weapons drawn, their faces grim. They move with practiced efficiency, securing the downed figure, cuffing him, their voices sharp and authoritative. One of the uniformed agents, an older woman with tired but alert eyes, approaches you, his gaze sweeping over your disheveled appearance, the blood trickling from your jaw, the raw scrape on your arm. "Seth Corbin," he asks, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. You nod, unable to speak, your throat raw, your lungs burning. She gives a curt nod to her colleagues, then turns back to you. "He's secured. You did good. But the fight isn't over." "Not truly." As they hoist him, half-conscious and still twitching, his head lolls. His eyes, now dull with the after-effects of the taser, find yours. The necessary correction. The world is a canvas, Seth and I. He saw himself not as a killer, but as an artist, a sculptor of society, eradicating what he perceived as imperfections. The decades-long pattern, the seemingly disparate victims, they were all part of his twisted masterpiece, a grand design to correct what he deemed broken. He truly believed he was doing good, his logic so warped, so utterly divorced from human empathy, that it was terrifying in its purity. You stare at him, the weight of years, of countless lives extinguished, settling upon your shoulders. The motive wasn't revenge, not greed, not even simple madness. It was a terrifying, self-appointed divine right, a conviction that he held the power to judge and execute, to purify the world according to his own deranged aesthetic. The uniformed agents move about, collecting the acts, documenting the scene. The older woman returns, offering you a sterile wipe for your jaw. "You need to get checked out," she says gently. You take the wipe, pressing it to your jaw, the sting a dull ache compared to the ache in your soul. You lean against the filing cabinet, the cold metal a stark contrast to the lingering heat of adrenaline. Justice, in its rawest, most immediate form, has been served. The phantom killer, the specter that haunted your career and your sleep, is a man in cuffs, his twisted ideology finally exposed. The immediate threat is neutralized. But the resolution isn't a burst of light, a sudden clarity. It's a slow, arduous unwinding. The physical toll is evident, the throbbing jaw, the scraped arm, the tremor in your hands. But it's the emotional exhaustion that truly weighs you down. The years of doubt, the gnawing guilt, the relentless pursuit, it all culminates in this moment, not with triumph, but with a profound, bone-deep weariness. The determination that fueled you through the labyrinthine investigation begins to recede, leaving behind a vast, empty space. You close your eyes, the image of his calm, self-righteous face still burned into your vision. The desert outside stretches endlessly, a canvas of harsh beauty under a relentless sun. You stand by the window, the vast, bruised sky mirroring the landscape within you. The words still echo, a chilling mantra from the one you finally cornered, artist, sculptor of society. The desert stretches out, indifferent to human folly, a stark canvas for the grotesque masterpiece he believed he was painting across decades. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead is a dull throb against the persistent ringing in your ears. Hours have blurred since the apprehension, since the final, desperate chase across the sun-baked earth, ending not with a bang, but with a quiet, almost serene surrender near a derelict water tower. He carries a steaming mug, its warmth radiating even before you grasp. He's talking, the colleague states, his voice low, a gravelly counterpoint to the desert sigh. Not confessing, mind you. Explaining. Justifying. Like a professor detailing a theorem. You turn from the window, the ceramic against your palm a grounding presence. He always would. You murmur, the taste of ash on your tongue. He needs an audience to validate his twisted narrative. The bitterness of the coffee matches the lingering taste of the past. A blend of failure and vindication. The main detective on the case, a woman whose patience seemed as endless as the desert horizon, emerges from the interview room. Her face is etched with the fatigue of a marathon, but a certain grim satisfaction lines her mouth, a subtle tightening at the corners. Every thread. The imperfections he targeted, the embezzler, the corrupt union boss, the slumlord, the disgraced academic, the fentanyl dealer. All of them, in his twisted view, parasites on the social fabric. The ghosts that cost me everything. The names flicker through your mind, faces from old case files, each one a nail in the coffin of your career. He calls them his early sketches. The detective continues, a note of disbelief still present in her voice, despite all she'd heard. He perfected his technique over time. The later victims, the ones that brought you back into this, they were his refined strokes. Each one chosen with surgical precision, their deaths orchestrated to appear as natural consequences of their own vices or disappearances into the vast, unforgiving landscape. The detective's next words are a bomb, unexpected and potent, a quiet affirmation that begins to mend a long festering wound. Your theories, Seth. The connections you saw, even when no one else would listen. They were right. Every single one. The patterns, the subtle shifts, the underlying philosophy, you saw it all, even when the evidence was scattered like dust across decades. A fragile sense of vindication stirs within you, not a triumphant roar, but a quiet, profound hum. The old detective, a man whose skepticism had been a constant companion, enters the room. He doesn't offer an apology, but a curt nod, a subtle shift in the air that speaks volumes. His gaze, usually guarded, holds a flicker of respect you haven't seen in years. Good work, Corbin, he says, his voice gruff, yet devoid of its usual dismissive edge. You saw what we missed. The desert, once a symbol of your isolation, now feels like a witness to your redemption, a silent observer of your return from the wilderness. The killer is contained, his grotesque art dismantled. But the experience has etched itself onto your very bones. You are not the same man who walked away from the badge years ago. The world no longer appears in simple black and white. You know now that true evil often wears the mask of conviction, that monsters are not always monstrous in appearance. As you drive away, the road stretching endlessly before you, a new purpose begins to coalesce. The quiet satisfaction of truth, hard-won and painful, settles over you. The road ahead is uncertain, but for the first time in years, it feels like your road, forged anew in the crucible of a nightmare. You are a sentinel now, not by title, but by the scars you carry, by the knowledge you bear. The desert sun rises higher, illuminating a path you never anticipated, but one you are finally ready to walk.